Hi, it's Ashley from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials as well as give a lot of baking business tips. And welcome to another day of Vlogmas. I believe we only have one more day of Vlogmas left, but I might have a few extra videos coming up that have some Christmas elements to them. So today I'm going to be showing you all of the ways that I decorated the shortbread and sugar cookies that I made for the season. I will leave the recipe for the shortbread down in the description box below, and this is just my classic sugar cookie recipe that I was using. Now, I only use the sugar cookie for the plaques that I'm going to be showing you later on. All of these polar bears and Christmas trees, these are all made up of the shortbread recipe. Now, I must admit that the shortbread did not turn out as cleanly cut as I'm normally used to, like my sugar cookie recipe. It's a very, very clean cut when it comes to all of the cookie shapes, but not to worry because adding all the frosting on top really does make it look like a clean cut cookie. But I will say if you're looking for something that has super crisp edges to it and nice and sharp, this might not be the recipe for you. However, you can combat that a little bit by placing the cookies in the fridge after you roll it out. And then, of course, bake them as per usual. Now, with all of these cookies, I'm using pipe and flood consistency, and later on, I will bring in some piping consistency. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about with the whole pipe and flood consistency, you'll want to check out this video in the right-hand corner. Now, I'm just using royal icing, which I make with meringue powder. You can also do this with egg whites, and I suggest that you use pasteurized egg whites if you are going to go that route. Meringue powder is just so much easier because you don't have to deal with raw egg whites whatsoever. So I do about 1 cup of confectioner sugar, or also known as powdered sugar, to 1 tablespoon of meringue powder, and then add as much water as needed. It's really important that whenever you are making royal icing that you do whip it up. I used to do it by hand. It works so much better if you whip it with a stand mixer, or with a hand mixer also works too. Now, for the most part, I like to get away with using as much white as I can because I like to use my airbrush later on, but you can also choose to dye your icings. And for when I'm doing something like this, where I'm actually going to be blocking off the different colors, it is kind of imperative that you have to dye your frosting. It's not going to work if you do it with an airbrush. I mean, you can, but you'll have to block things off, and it's easier in the long run just to dye your frosting in this instance. Any food gel will work. One of my favorite brands is Chef Master or AmeriColor. They both work really well. And I decided to go with 2 different green tones in this. By the way, if you ever want to achieve this kind of lime green, almost Grinch colored green, I call it, you want to add in a little bit of yellow. That's what's just going to brighten it up a little bit more. And whenever you're coloring your royal icings, you want to make sure that you start off with just a little. It's always easier to add more, but it's very difficult to take away. You can always add in white food coloring if you've added a little bit too much color, but you'll never go back as much as you possibly might want to. So that's why I always say a little bit at a time. I also suggest that you use tipless piping bags. You'll notice that for the polar bears earlier on in the video, I actually used a little bit of a thicker tip because it's such a vast space. So I wanted that hole to be a little bit bigger so that the flow is faster and it just goes much faster, the whole decorating process. Yet with these trees here, the hole is a little bit smaller. And instead of having to switch tips on and off, I can literally just cut that hole as big as I need it to be. Originally, I was going to project all of this alphabet onto the cookie, but I decided I'm just going to go with my own block lettering, and whatever will be, will be. So I used a little bit of a different style for the writing here. What I'm doing is I'm outlining it, and I am still using pipe and flood consistency for this. So that's why it's a little bit different. Now, if you're working on a much smaller cookie, I do not recommend this because you're going to get very frustrated with the fact that you won't be able to get as precise of letters. So this is literally the smallest cookie that I would do with this pipe and flood consistency. If this were a smaller cookie, I would definitely go for piping consistency, and I would choose to do that outline definitely with piping consistency. By the way, you might see me jumping back and forth between cookies. That's because what I'm doing is I'm dehydrating that icing in between so that I can add the layers in that I'll need. If you've ever seen those cookies where it seems like the designs are just kind of all blurring together, or you've struggled with that, it's probably because the layers are not dried in between. So you want to make sure that before you add on another layer that everything is sufficiently dried enough. And when I say dried enough, it's because when you use the dehydration technique, which if you want to know more about that, click this video in the right hand corner, then you're going to only get that surface dry enough, and then you're going to place the next layer on top. You do not need the icing to be dried through and through because you're not going to stack it right away. If you are planning on stacking your cookies, you do need to make sure that everything is fully dry, and I find that generally takes a full 24 hours. Going back to our writing here, I'm only doing every second letter, and I am filling this with the pipe and flood consistency. Now, the reason is because I don't want to see any lumps and bumps on this lettering, so that's why we're going with that pipe and flood consistency instead of piping consistency. If you're ever setting up a decorating station, then trees are a great one because you can be really, really creative with this, and it'll always look good. Whatever you do on that tree, it's going to look beautiful. It's a great option for children. After I did every second letter, I let that layer dry, and then I'm going in with this. Now, the reason that I let the layers dry in between is because if I just went ahead and I filled everything in, because all those letters are so tight together, it probably would end up melding all together and you would lose some of that lettering and you would just kind of see the outline. This way, everything stays nice and puffy and we can see each of those letters really clearly. Now with piping consistency, I'm going in and I'm adding the and family. And if you guys have seen my videos before, you know I love switching up different fonts on the same cookie. It really brings everything together, and then I don't have to be so stressed about fitting everything in perfectly. You'll notice with family on the bottom of some of those, I kind of cheat a little bit. I do it in script, so then that way I don't really have to make sure that everything perfectly fits. I can just kind of fake it a little bit. I wanted to keep these fairly sleek looking, so I thought that that kind of minty green with all of these white accents, and later on I'll add a little bit of gold. I just really thought that gave it a little bit of a modern vibe while still having plenty of holiday cheer. Now moving along to our polar bears, these are fully dried, and I don't think I actually used the dehydration technique with these because they were all on here and I had so many cookies to do, so sometimes when I know that I won't be back around to those cookies in a long time, I don't bother putting them into the oven. Now to create this knitted look, I'm really just creating little hearts and I'm going back and forth. Now once you get good at this, you can just kind of go back and forth without even lifting your piping bag. But if you want to create those little hearts and pull that piping bag up, then that is totally fine. And I am using fairly thick piping consistency for this. If you don't go thick with the royal icing on here, it's just going to all meld together and you won't get that knitted look. And in order to get that icing thicker, you need to add more icing sugar or more meringue powder. I always err on the side of more meringue powder. It just keeps things nice and fluffy and won't give you that super pasty, hurting your hand type of consistency. Now here you'll see that for the green polar bears, I used pipe and flood consistency for the scarves, so it's just nice and flat. Then I went ahead and I airbrushed that very, very gently with a little bit of pink. I also airbrushed these gingerbread men with a little bit of brown. They were white before, and I'm going ahead and adding on those little black eyes, a little glint, always to the upper right-hand corner. If you've seen all my Vlogmas videos, I have talked about this several times, but it's just so weird. I just noticed it the other day that I always put it there. A little bit of eyebrows, and we want to make this look like a classic little gingerbread man, so we're putting on those little icing strips, really making sure that you're giving equal pressure whenever you're doing something like squiggles. And then we're putting some heart buttons on as well. You could make these just round buttons if you'd like, but I thought I just wanted to add a little bit of extra cute. And the other day I made these Wednesday themed cookies, and I really only gave her a hint of a smile because obviously she's Wednesday. So this time I decided to go for the full-on smile. Now I wasn't going to add anything to these polar bears, but I just felt like the pink ones needed a little bit of that extra glamour, so I decided to add on half of a snowflake. I don't know, kind of like a snowflake sunbeam, if you will. And then I added a gold pearl on the bottom for the tail. And then I went ahead and instead of just going in with these with brown, and I just didn't feel like making a whole new brown color just for this section, so I decided to go directly on the cookie and paint that with a little bit of edible luster dust mixed with vodka. And then I also did the same thing for the word family on each of those cookies. And here is the finished product. This is just one of many many treats that I put inside of the cookie treat boxes this year. I think they were my favorite part of the treat boxes. It really just makes it look like something special. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading every single day for Vlogmas. We have one day left, so make sure that you come back tomorrow to see what I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!